This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 78. Justin Briggs. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 78 of Experts on the Wire. We're going to do a hard start and jump right into the interview today, except for one thing. First, I want to make sure that you listen through to the sponsor spot of this show, because not only am I going to tell you all about BuzzSumo, our awesome sponsor, but I have a very special offer for you, a way to save $699 on something. I'm not being hyperbolic or joking. That will come right after BuzzSumo's sponsor spot, so make sure to at least listen to that. Now, my guest, Justin Briggs, is here today to talk all about video, YouTube SEO, and SEO consulting. Justin, how are you?
Doing great. Thank you for having me today. I know we've had to kind of finagle the schedule to get me on here, but thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Justin, I'm very interested in your backstory. I know a little bit about this, but as I recall, it has something to do, I believe, with living in your car. Can you take us back to the beginning of that story when you got into SEO?
Yeah. So a lot of that just has to do with, so I originally went to school. We can get a little personal, but had a little bit of a rough upbringing. I think ultimately culminated in that situation. But had ended up going to college actually to study biomedical engineering. Actually dealt with some personal things then and ended up actually dropping out of school. And that actually led me to moving back to Nashville. And during that period of time, I actually did live out of my car for a couple of months. I had a buddy who actually let me sleep on like a blow-up mattress in one of his spare bedrooms that he used to store stuff in. So that was kind of during the transition period between when I first started doing SEO consulting. So I've been doing things in kind of the technical world for a while. So I started programming, I think, when I was about 11. Starting with HTML, was doing Python, I think, in 6th or 7th grade, learned C++ and kind of moved on from there. And so when I went to school for engineering, I learned to code there as well. And then that kind of led into us doing me and my friend doing more web design and development work. And I had started doing affiliate consulting or affiliate work when I was actually in college. And that's kind of how I started learning a little bit about SEO. I made my first $25 and I was like, okay, how do I start getting more traffic? And that kind of set me on this journey of kind of learning. And then I had dropped out of school and was like, hey, this isn't really working out for me. I'm actually going to pursue internet marketing. And I'd gotten my first kind of small consulting client. It was actually, I think it was $2,000 a month for a wedding photographer in Nashville. And that's kind of what I was doing when I had dropped out of school. And I actually ended up getting a job at a agency in Nashville, which was kind of a web design development agency that also had marketing work. And that's kind of was my intro into actually doing more professional SEO.
And so let me stop you right there. How did you get that first consulting gig for $2,000 a month? Because I think some of the listeners might be in that position, or maybe they're trying to go on their own for consulting. How did that happen for you?
That's a really good question. So in large part, I got it mostly through blogging. So I think I mostly kind of became known for blogging once I actually went and started working at Distilled in Seattle. But I had been blogging for a couple of years prior to that. And that content is still not live anymore, but through those efforts, and I was really active in a lot of communities. I had run into someone who was in Nashville who found out, hey, you're here, I would like to hire you. And they just reached out to me. So it was really just kind of them cold pitching me. There were a number of blogs I used to participate on back in the day. And so it was actually used to be much more common to just interact with people in the comments of blogs. We're talking 2006, 2007 to 2009. And so a lot of that stuff, it was effectively before Twitter became big. A lot of the interactions used to do would be through actual blog commenting. And so that's where I actually began to kind of know people and forums and things like that. And they were just kind of local. He knew that I was there. I'd done a couple of small speaking gigs, which he might have actually maybe seen me through that. So there used to be something called Bar Camp and Pod Camp. They were actually, it was Bar Camp, I think, where it actually would be about web design development and things like that. And they were little kind of unconference meetups. And so that's where I started cutting my teeth on doing presentations. So there's a couple of videos that you could probably find of me presenting in 2008 that are pretty bad.
Now that you mention them, I will be digging them up and putting them in the show notes if I can find those. So I think, and I try to draw some takeaways for the listeners based upon your past experience. it really sounds like getting out there, publishing content, speaking was the catalyst for you to get these initial gigs. What advice would you give somebody today in 2017 that's trying to get out there, maybe get hired as a consultant, get in front of companies, work in-house, work at an agency? What do you think they should be doing today in 2017? It's quite a different world than it was back then.
Absolutely. I think that at least in the time period that I came up in, I think a lot of SEOs did, blogging was kind of like the thing to do. I don't think that blogging resonates in our industry as well as it used to. I don't see blogs getting shared as much or people as being as active on Twitter. I think that if you're looking for popularity and notoriety, I think Instagram and YouTube are larger channels, but I don't really think that our industry as a whole has really jumped on board with those. What I've actually seen be the kind of the most successful still to this day is conferences. I would say every major client that I've ever had, anyone who's worth a significant amount of money, has been because I met them in person. So the client that we have right now that we've had the longest, I met them at Search Fest in Portland. And I was just talking to this person, didn't know who they were. It turns out they were a marketer at one of the largest e-commerce websites on the internet. And they're like, hey, you want to go get some tacos? And so it was just after the conference, and we just went and got tacos here in the Pearl District here in Portland. And it went really great. And we hung out. And it wasn't until about 3 years later when I had quit a job that they emailed me and was like, hey, we saw that you're free now. Would you like to work together? A similar story, like a large retail shoe brand. I was actually at Search Fest again. And I was just sitting at the bar that's actually at the bottom of the Sentinel Hotel. And just this person was just sitting there like, oh, you're at the conference. Like, what do you do? And I just chatted with them. And we talked for like 40 minutes or so before I actually asked them where they worked. And so I probably should ask up front. I would have been more nervous. And that ended up being the very first client that Briggsby ever had. And that really helped us kind of get started. And then a very similar story. I'd written a lot of blog posts and got mentioned in several presentations at MozCon about 4 years ago. And that's also where a person was like, who's this Justin guy that people keep talking about? And I was introduced actually, I think by Ross Hudgens to another person who is also now one of our clients. And so I really find like that in-person interaction is really great. And then I would say, I think the thing that allowed me to get some of those presentations is I try to write the content for whoever's going to be the people who give presentations. So I want to write the type of content that's one like Will Reynolds or Patty is going to kind of look at and say, hey, I want to reference his work.
Patty Mugen.
And so something like that. So if Marshall Simmons is going to give a presentation, I want to make sure that I've given him the type of information that the guys at his team really, really appreciate.
Yeah, I hope as the listener out there, you're catching all the things Justin is saying. Justin, you've given me like a whole other list of topics for another podcast interview, all about networking and what you just said there, like creating the content that people are going to share on stage, like creating the ammo for Will Reynolds or for Andy Cushing or for anybody that speaks to use in the conference. That's such a great tip. I want to talk just a moment about Distilled and your experience there. You just tweeted the other day about how companies like Distilled, like Seer, like Moz have given you so much in the world of SEO. And so many people, like there's so many alumni that have come out of Distilled. There's you, there's Tom Critchlow, John Doherty, like so many people. What do you think it was about Distilled, or even is still about Distilled, that has sort of churned out so many great people in the SEO and marketing space?
That's a really good question. I think I know what they've done. I just don't know exactly how they've accomplished it. So, I mean, they talked internally very heavily about the priority there is to find people who are smart and who, quote unquote, get shit done. And that was really their priority over necessarily being someone who knows SEO. So I think it's easy to hire an SEO because a person is technically proficient or they have popularity. And I found that just because maybe a person is a popular blogger or a popular speaker doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a great SEO. They might be better at marketing themselves than they are at actually marketing other businesses. But they were really good at like honing in on that kind of part of a person. So they would identify that a person had the ability to learn. And I think that, and then there was like a certain degree of ownership that they would kind of give people. And so there was a culture there of if you saw something that needed to get fixed, not to ask permission to do it, just to do it. And there was actually like a rubber duck that was like passed around the office that other people would reward you. And
like an actual physical rubber duck?
Yeah, like an actual rubber duck. And there was like two different ones. And one person could hold at a time. And the only other one could only be rewarded to you by the previous person who had won it. And it was rewarded for basically like owning something. So there was a situation that you saw a problem on, and you just stepped up and like spent the evening and made a solution for it, or took it on kind of your responsibility to fix it. And then if a person was impressed by the effort that you made enough that a previous person who had won it would walk over to your desk and give it to you. And so they did a lot of little things to kind of mechanize kind of culture. They would also reward things like Starbucks gift cards for giving ideas. So they actually had an idea box, like how can you make Distilled better? So I think a lot of that kind of like finding the smart, gets things done type of people, then putting them in an environment that just kind of says, go and try to be an entrepreneur kind of within the business. I think they really developed that. I think the negative is that they were very supportive. I mean, so it's not a negative for me. They were very supportive of people building up their own individual brands. But I think that it makes it harder for agencies to retain employees.
Right.
So I think that that's one of the challenges. Like you named a lot of people who worked at Distilled, who became known, but they no longer work at Distilled. And I think that that's one of the challenges of building up a reputation.
They're almost so giving that they help support the employees, and then they go off and do their own thing, which is a very virtuous thing to do. And then you went on to work with Getty and Big Fish Games, both in-house. Now I want to move to, I'm just kind of skipping over those two things because I want to move to talk about Briggsby for a second. This is your own agency. We're going to talk more in depth later, but I just want to know, like, real quick, what is it that Briggsby does, and why did you start your own agency versus stay in-house or work at another agency?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, because I mean, like, if I were to go back to agency life, I probably would work with a company like Distilled. Because even at this point in time, they're probably some of the greatest people. So the question is why did I decide to start my own agency versus go and kind of get a job? So I think entrepreneur spirit is kind of something that I have had for most of my life. So influences in my life, whether or not it's my mom or my uncle, most of them always kind of owned their own business. And so I was also kind of raised in a relatively low income family. So kind of this scrappy, like do whatever it takes to get ahead, whatever it takes to make money. I think that that's kind of influenced my personality. So I've tried to start a business several times, and I really never kind of stuck with it until this last kind of permutation. I think we've been open now for about 3 years. But the reason I actually dropped this time is I decided that I wanted to go back and study after I dropped out of school. And it actually came when I wanted to kind of pursue film. And UW had a certificate program that actually allowed you kind of study film. And I wanted to actually invest a little bit more time into actually taking that very seriously. So I tried to negotiate the ability to have more flexible work hours when I worked in-house and not actually lose the pay that I had. So that negotiation didn't work out because there was actually a reorg that happened in the middle of that. And so I actually quit my job and started Briggsby to pursue film. And once I decided to make that, I had actually decided I was just going to go back to school full time. So that's the reason I also moved to Portland. So I'm currently pursuing a Bachelor's of Science in Film, and I'll be done with that after 2 more classes.
Wow.
And that's kind of the reason I started Briggsby, was really to create a business that allowed, that supported the things that I wanted to accomplish in my life outside of just SEO and things like that. So it gives that flexibility.
Yeah. And I love that your answer wasn't just like to make more money, right? Because you have bigger reasons for it. And I noticed on your LinkedIn, this might seem like a small detail, but you say we partner with clients, not they hire us, not like we consult for them. Why choose that word partner? What is the significance of that for you?
That's a really good question. I think it kind of, I know one of the tweets that I had, which we might talk about, is kind of like checks Box SEO. That part of the work that I'm doing is not necessarily to dictate or be an outside person who is giving them thoughts and information for them to consider. We try to work really, really hard to be more of a team member. And I think that that's something that a lot of people say, and they don't necessarily back up. So we have clients who are in California who we visit every 3 months. We sometimes visit our clients and have actually attended stand-up meetings with developers. We try really, really hard to make sure that whatever it takes. I think the biggest compliment that we ever had was one of our clients sent us a $500 gift card just because this one week things just went completely haywire. And we don't usually work long weeks. I mean, we actually try to keep ourselves at probably like 60, 70% capacity so that we're not overworked. And we just worked endlessly. So, I mean, it wouldn't be surprising for me to be working all day, Saturday, Sunday, trying to solve this problem. And that's not something that we do often. But this is an area where I was influenced by Distilled. So one of the things that Tom Critchlow did is he came in and gave us a presentation once, early days at Distilled, about how everything that goes wrong with your client is your fault. If they don't do something, it's your fault of communicating. If they're not getting buy-in, it's because you didn't give them the ammunition to do so. And so he kind of had this mantra of you can't outsource giving a shit. And I actually wanted to kind of disagree with that. I think that at Briggsby, we try really hard to be a place that you can outsource our kind of giving a shit about something. Sorry for the language, but just in terms of saying like we're really, really passionate and care about that person's job and career as much as we can. I think it speaks to the fact that our current big clients we've been with for 3.5, 4 years. We got the longest con we've had 3 months into starting, and we basically haven't ended since. And I think a lot of that does come from just really trying to be more of a partner and trying to make sure that we really care about the success of their business and not just trying to deliver SEO.
I have one more consulting question, but we're going to do some more of that later on. But it just jumped in my head, so I want to make sure I ask you, how are you delivering work? Because I'm running a small SEO agency here. It's basically myself and my wife at this point, one contractor. I've been finding I'm delivering a lot of my work very sort of quote in person, even if it's virtually, very training, teaching, one-on-one oriented. I'm diminishing a lot of the big documents I used to do. I sort of hate doing them, to be honest, in a lot of ways. And I'm not really big into, writing down 30 pages of text and taking a whole ton of screenshots. I'd rather get on the line with somebody and show them. How are you delivering work, let's say, or deliverables? Are you doing deliverables? Is it a lot virtually? Are you creating videos for clients? How does that work for Briggsby?
That's a great question. The answer is kind of yes, all of the above. But basically what it is our deliverables really change based off of who's going to be the audience. So we definitely don't have a one size fit all. And I think that's easy to say. But what I mean by that is we have different types of clients. So one of our clients has really, really technical SEOs on their staff. And they're effectively like talking to an equivalent of us. And we are more like an alternative person to discuss complex problems with. In those situations, there's more often that we're just emailing, we're just having telephone calls, we're just having Skype conversations. And more often than not, we're actually just we're in the nuts and the bolts of the particular types of problems that we're solving. But even with them, there are times when things need to level up. So we'll usually ask, is this a Basecamp reply or is this a deliverable? And really what we mean by that is, do you need to put our letterhead on something so that you can circulate it around internally? Right. Because we found that things will get buy-in just because it came from an external agency. So there are times when things need to be communicated up. In terms of like large scale deliverables for audits, we will typically do an quote unquote audit when we first bring a client on. But I found that I kind of hate the word audit because a lot of people think an audit is a 40 to 80 page document, a lot of checklists, a lot of template, boilerplate stuff. And it just kind of sits on a desk or in a filing cabinet for a year and doesn't get done. So we will typically have like a Google Doc or an Excel spreadsheet that will actually track everything that we find. And we'll prioritize that. But then that is kind of almost treated as a distraction. Like, here's all this information that if you want to work on it. And I think that's valuable because people might have engineers that run in different tracks from their main engineers. And they might have someone who says like, this person can just work on bug fixes. And so that's really great work to kind of hand through that path. But then what we do from there is we actually try to build up a overall strategy recommendation where we only try to find like maybe 8 to 12 things. So think about kind of 3 different tracks and 1 major milestone for each quarter. And we kind of pitch that. And that stuff is typically presented in person. So anytime we have like a larger presentation or strategy, we always do that in person. We've done training over the phone. And through kind of like a video conference. But for the most part, if we're actually doing like a real deliverable, that's always in person.
I love that. And you know what I'm going to do, Justin? I'm going to switch things up real time and just continue talking about SEO and SEO consulting because I love going down this track. I don't want to interrupt the flow that you're in here. And so we're going to push the YouTube and video stuff on the back end of this interview. No problem. And I'm going to jump right down to the SEO stuff. So just perfectly aligning off of what you just said, you tweeted recently about so-called checkbox SEO. And this notion that, and your tweet right here, I have it, I'll read it. It says, shortcoming I see in SEO programs is checkbox SEO or chasing fixes, bugs, and optimizations, a habit encouraged by SEO agency templates. I get that. I do have one devil's advocate counter to that, and I'd love to hear your response. In some cases, I've seen this checkbox SEO does make the owner, the person running the marketing department, it makes them feel a certain degree of good about their SEO, because they can say, okay, I have peace of mind that a professional has checked everything. We fixed the important stuff. We're good to go. They understand it's not going to move the ranking needle. They understand it's not strategic, but they are looking for, hey, let's give us that insurance policy. Give us this list of things that we know we should be doing and help us make sure we're doing them. And then they feel better about that. And so I do see a certain degree of value in that. And maybe you agree to some extent, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, is there an okay time where checkbox SEO can be a positive thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in some ways I'm a little facetious in the tweet. I think checkbox SEO, I would say that I like to prioritize the things that are kind of classify as the following, like anything that is an incremental effort towards an overall larger initiative. I think those types of things carry a lot of value. I think that things that are systemic, that this little issue exists or you're getting this bug report in one of your tools because there is a foundational problem that exists. I definitely do think that those types of problems should be checked off. And
so one example, just for the listeners, I can think of large images in blogs, etc. I catch those all the time, and half the time I say, well, just take your top 20 trafficked pieces of content, make sure those images are reduced in size, but set up a process in the future where your content people, your bloggers, etc., are not uploading these 3,000 pixel size images at the beginning. Is that the sort of systemic thing you're referring to?
Yeah, so so that's a really great example of checkbox SEO, which is maybe it's just the image's file name. Like, that's a really good example of the type of thing that you'll see crop up in a Screaming Frog crawl. Hey, maybe you should name these with all the SEO best practices, dashes, lowercase, descriptive 2 to 5 words, right? And you'll have someone who just spend hours doing that much work. And they won't see a lot of return for that same amount of effort. And so what we're talking about is like, let's backtrack and at least say, let's educate all the content teams to make sure that moving forward, we're not continuing to add to that problem. And I wouldn't necessarily ignore that problem exists, but I would be transparent with kind of the client and hope that they would realize themselves that it's not the biggest thing to kind of move forward on. And it's one of those things that you can circle back to. Like if you hit like a roadblock when your resource team gets taken away, so like if you're working on something that's like, oh, we had an engineering team and they got pulled off on a new initiative and we don't have any releases for the next 6 weeks. Well, it's like, well, now you can go into WordPress and spend the time that you have downtime working on that kind of stuff. So right. I think it's really about understanding where those priorities are and like when to touch them. And to not put them in front of work if you have the ability to move larger rocks. To your point about making sure that the client feels good, I think I would agree with that as well. I think that's where you have to separate yourself as a consultant versus an SEO. So an SEO is like, this is the work that has to get done. This is the priority. But then a large part of SEO is getting it done. I think actual SEO is very, very simple. Yes. The hard part of SEO is getting it accomplished. Yes. And part of that is managing people. And so sometimes I find that the work that we do as a consultant is we're just therapists, talking people off the ledges, getting people to feel confident in their own ideas. And there's a lot of that kind of stuff. And so sometimes a person might not be quite there yet. And so these types of smaller tasks are things that they can work on and make effort and feel like they're making progress while maybe we're working to help them with something else. And we might not be transparent with them that we're helping them on another project. We might talk internally about how we're trying to change a person's behavior on the team, or we're trying to get 2 different people on the team to get along. And we're not being transparent with them that that's something that we're actually doing, but that's what we see as part of our job, is to get them to the place that they can do that work. And we've had at least one client where it took us almost a year to get them to release anything that we had suggested proactively. And a lot of that was just kind of building buy-in and trust for a year. So sometimes it is worth that kind of long-term effort and doing things that maybe you don't love to do, but it's for the long term.
And a lot of time it could be processed too. I had a client once, sort of a medium to bigger size brand, B2C. I was trying to get them to move their blog to blog.domain.com versus they had like some weird subdomain. I forget what it was, but it had there was no intuition that it was a blog. It took them over a year to do it. Same thing. This wasn't that they didn't agree. It was that they just had so many roadblocks development wise that they just couldn't pull their act together and make it happen. Do you also jump in those cases and even handhold developers with maybe they agree, but they just can't unstick and figure out how to get the actual thing to happen in their process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's kind of two interesting parts there. I think one, people get into certain types of tasks because they are the easier ones to accomplish. So you naturally kind of find your way moving towards the area of less friction. And I've noticed that what will often happen is that SEOs over time will become more social media managers. They'll become more content marketing managers. They'll become more PR oriented because these are easier rocks to move. And they'll find that getting resources and developments from other projects is actually really, really hard. And you have to have some really high level conversations to steal those priorities away from other people or to get those things moved in your direction. But in terms of sometimes it is actually developers get stuck. I actually feel like that's a lot of the work that we do as well. And I think that goes into this idea of checkbox SEO. And what I mean by that is you can say this is the perfect way to solve this problem. And I think when you work with a middle to large size business, you'll figure out like that's just not going to happen. We have a platform or a system that was built 10 years ago, and it just doesn't do what you want it to do.
Right.
And so a lot of what we're trying to do is build a relationship with developers to kind of have a proactive conversation about here's what we want to accomplish at the end and here's why. And it's really about a conversation about how do we actually have a mediated kind of solution where we can get as many of those benefits. And maybe I didn't prescribe the actual right solution. I just am trying to describe to you what I want to accomplish. And then I really need to lean on their engineers to kind of help them navigate to that kind of solution. We definitely spend time doing a lot of that kind of stuff. And it depends on the client that we have, because as I mentioned, some of our clients are really, really technical. They can have those conversations on their own. And really what they're doing is they're just bouncing them off of us. Other times we have clients who they don't know how to code HTML. And so it's just kind of like, hey, you guys talk to them for us.
I want to chat a little bit about this tweet from the end of May. You said SEO can be powerful for small to medium business. You spend 10 hours a month for 6 months on a site for a friend. SEO revenue, $600,000 to $958,000 a month. Hashtag free money. I know that's probably a little facetious as well, because nothing is really truly free, but
absolutely.
I remember responding to you. I said, what types of implementations? I'm not sure if all your tweets are still there. You replied back with 10 tweets about the process for what you did for this company for 6 months to help move the needle. I was wondering if you could just talk us through that process for a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I call it free money because I think one of the really nice things about SEO is that it does require an upfront investment. And then that investment is typically different compared to other marketing channels, which is like you're going to pay for traffic on an ongoing basis. We're usually going to do some type of upfront work. And as long as you don't break things, the lift that you'll see will pay returns the next 1 to 5 years. You'll get some type of lift, and effectively there's some kind of CPA for that initial effort. And yeah, that first year you're going to have paid for those. But then that next year, you haven't paid for those visits. So I think that as you move forward, that becomes free traffic, or at least you can say that there's some costs of maintenance. So yeah, I'm being facetious there, but as long as you don't break things, there's a lot of value there. I also think that the other thing that's maybe a little misleading about the tweet is that I said 10 hours, and 10 hours is actually how much time we spent there, but I also have 8 years of SEO experience. And if I'm dealing with a relatively straightforward problem, I really think that SEO is a bit like algebra. There's only 3 to 5 things that you need to know. Like you move the variables from one side to the other, and maybe you substitute, and it's the same problem over and over. And I feel like that's SEO. So when I see a problem on a website, I don't really need to spend a lot of time solving it if it's a simple problem. I mean, when you start to get into large e-commerce websites, things like that, then it's a completely different game. But for sites like this, in 10 hours, I can actually deliver a very large amount of value. The first thing that we did was an audit, and there was 2 parts of that. One was a screaming frog, and basically exported everything that we saw that was a technical problem. The second one was a review of every single template. So there's like a category, a product, and a homepage template. And then we recommended that they add a blog. Then our next recommendation was that they actually hire a web development agency to do all that work. So that's not free there in that sense. And then after that, it really was just kind of straightforward. So it was really just eliminate all your problems. I really kind of see SEO as a couple of major things. One, do you have technical issues that are preventing Google from indexing your site? We need to completely eliminate any of those that actually are creating major issues. The second one is, do you have the right landing pages to target the things that people are searching for? So we just did title tag rewrites on all their pages. And then we identified a couple of like key things. So they're a tourism website. So we identified points of interest that they didn't have landing pages for. Mm-hmm. And then we took like the next 2 months just writing that content for them. They didn't have a content writer. We didn't think that they were going to be able to write really high quality content necessarily without kind of a lot of education. So we wrote those articles for them. And then after that, it was mainly link building. And this is just kind of basic 101 link building. So what we did is we first educated them. We showed them, okay, here are some of your top SERPs. Here are the people who are ranking for them. And here's what they're doing that you're not doing. We actually did like a competitive backlink analysis and demonstrated to them all the different ways that other sites were getting their links. So like, hey, a local hotel in a particular city is linking to their excursion. Mm-hmm. So we taught them how to do that. And then we had them put together a list of all the relationships that they had. We worked real hard with them to kind of brainstorm them. And then we actually empowered them to actually do the outreach themselves. So the first couple of outreaches that they did, we handheld, we kind of advised them on their first couple of templates, helped them negotiate a link placement for the first time. And then after that, we just set them free. And so we did most of this work during the off season period. And so the numbers that I quoted was actually a year-over-year comparison of the first month of their season versus that month last year. Mm-hmm. And so they actually had a lot of really nice growth, but it was really just kind of foundational SEO work.
Yeah, I love that you said just making sure they have the pages to target the searches, because that's like one of the biggest holes I see in most SEO, like what's lacking in SEO is like just people not having the right content to target certain key phrases. So back to SEO 101, like you said, that's what I find myself doing oftentimes is just like, hey, you need to like create these 5 pages. Otherwise, you're never going to rank for these things you want to rank for. So I love that. We're going to chat in a moment about staying small as an agency, and then we're going to get to YouTube SEO. I'm going to take a moment though right now to mention my sponsor, BuzzSumo. And actually, this is a very native ad, which I'm sure you can see, Justin. I want to ask you, do you use BuzzSumo at all, Justin?
I personally don't. Stephanie does though.
Okay.
And I don't know if we currently use them on any of our active clients, but I know she has historically.
So I'm sure if she was sitting there and I asked her, she might have a pro tip or whatnot to use with BuzzSumo. But I'm going to mention again, I know I've mentioned before on this show, the alert feature. I love the alert feature. And Justin, I'm sure you've used alerts before as well. I just set one up for a client that I did a little consulting call for a month ago, just to show them an example of what they could accomplish with alerts. And in the last month, using BuzzSumo's alert on their brand name and on their brand name, actually, we've gotten easily 5 to 10 link opportunities that were mentions, but not links on blogs or on news websites or on, really anything at all that's mentioning this company. Now, I will say alerts do work best when you have a brand or you have the name of a person or somebody that is getting mentioned out there, a podcast, by the way. It doesn't work quite as well for like an unknown company. But when you are getting mentioned, the BuzzSumo alerts work awesome. I opted, I think, to get 1 email a day with all the mentions that have happened in that day. I like that because then just once a day I can stay on top of it and forward those off to my client or show them how to set it up on their own. So I've been loving the alerts feature in BuzzSumo. They have given me a discount code, DanShure, DANSHURE. If you go to buzzsumo.com, enter the discount code, you will get 30% off 3 months of BuzzSumo and save like $75. So it's a great deal and you'll have a lot of fun playing around with BuzzSumo. Again, I've said it before, it's super fast. You can get social sharing data, link data like really quickly, very easily. So even that alone is hugely worth it. I've been loving BuzzSumo. Now, Justin, you're going to probably flip out at this deal that a company named Drift has offered me. So here's the special offer that I mentioned at the top of the show. Dave from Drift, who was on episode 28, he emailed me and he has an amazing offer for you, the listener of Experts in the Wire, exclusive to you, the listener of Experts in the Wire. It's for their first annual conference, Hypergrowth, which takes place in Boston the same week as Inbound. So there's going to be tons of marketers there. It takes place on Monday, 9/25, September 25th. Are you ready for this? With the discount code Evolving SEO, you get the entire $699 conference fee waived completely. You get to go for free. So with that code Evolving SEO, what you want to do is go to hypergrowth.drift.com and use the code Evolving SEO for a completely free ticket to their conference. And you can join them and all kinds of other marketers, SEOs, inbound marketers in Boston that week. Like I said, so many people are there for Inbound as well. Huge thanks to Dave and the folks at Drift for that. Justin, is that amazing? Like discount? That's crazy.
No, that's an amazing discount. I would highly recommend anyone try to take that up because one of the things I forgot to mention as one of the details of my story is I had won a conference or a contest like 5, 6, 7 years ago that actually awarded me a free pass to SMX East and a free pass to PubCon. And those were the first 2 conferences I ever went to. And I think one of the really great things about going to SEO conferences is it does help validate how much you think you know. Really kind of helps give you that confidence. But really becomes a place where you start to kind of meet people. So that was the first time I ever seen Will Reynolds speak. I met Ray Hoffman for the first time at SMX East that year. And so if you get a chance to go to a conference, I highly recommend it. I've seen it change a lot of people's lives in the SEO industry.
That's right. It's so funny. You talked about conferences earlier, and now I'm giving away a free ticket to a conference. I love that. Our story is so similar because I won a ticket for Affiliate Summit East 2011. That's where I first met Will Reynolds and a bunch of other people, Tom, the folks at Distilled. And I think I got a client from that as well. So I completely agree. Very similar story.
We met at Link Love in Boston.
We did, yes, in 2012. Very good memory, Justin. So I do want to circle back to the agency stuff, but I want to make sure we have plenty of time for YouTube video and SEO on YouTube. So let's jump to that. The context of this is I saw you tweeting like crazy a month or two ago from Vidcon, which is the video conference. First, Justin, frame this for us. What is the importance of video in 2017 and beyond? Why is this such a huge deal now?
It's a good question. So, I mean, in part, I'm biased because I have interest in video, obviously with going to film school and things like that. But I do actually think that there is a significant shift that's happening in the way that people consume media online. I think that blogging and the way that we traditionally used to do it in earlier blogging days is kind of a quote unquote old man's kind of medium. One of the most interesting things is when I talked at VidCon, we were actually put in little groups and we were supposed to do like a knowledge share. One of the person who was placed in my group was actually a 10-year-old girl. And she was probably the most insightful person and just kind of gave me looks like she was embarrassed for me when I would talk about things like blogging or even Facebook. And she's like, only old people use Facebook. And so I think that what we're starting to see is that and younger generations, they consume text media differently than maybe older audiences did, like when we used to have RSS readers and things like that. I think you see the hyper growth of video consumption. I think you see this in much more visual communications like Snapchat and Instagram, bleeding into more video content. I think you see the rapid growth of YouTube. They announced a lot of statistics. I think it was like 1.5 billion users or something like that.
Yes.
Continues to grow. Briggsby itself has done some research studies where we've actually seen that there's an affinity for younger audiences towards video, especially among much younger male audiences, where people are kind of saying, like, if I want to learn something, I go to YouTube to learn it. I don't necessarily go to a blog post anymore. And I think that that behavioral change is something that hasn't really been baked into everyone's content marketing strategy. I think a lot of SEO content marketing strategies are still the kind of traditional, we're going to write keyword articles about some type of topic. And I think a big reason for that is because video is a harder medium. And I think that that's one of the other benefits is it's a way of having kind of a higher caliber content. So you have your traditional text-based content. We went through a kind of a cycle for a while on the internet where infographics were a big thing, like the very traditional big poster style. Then those infographics kind of turn into more data visualizations, and then those turn into more interactive data visualizations. And I think that you kind of seen this progress of people trying to have more interactive, higher caliber content as a differentiation. And I think video is one of those things that gives you that. And I know you and I have talked a little bit on Twitter about how people's behavior is changing. People are becoming much more passive consumers of information. So this podcast is a really great example of that. With the growth of podcasts, again, like I might not have time to sit down and read a blog post, but I can listen to a podcast while I'm cleaning the house or I'm driving or something like that. And I think that's becoming also very true for video. I watch a lot of video in the same way that people listen to podcasts with YouTube Red. You could just close the app and have the audio playing in the background. And so I think there's actually a lot of opportunity there. I think you also see this in terms of where Google's going. They talked at Vidcon about how they've rapidly improved captioning and automatic transcriptions of videos. And that's really the progress of indexing video. They talked about it heavily from an accessibility perspective, but as an SEO, I'm like, oh, so you basically have figured out how to index video content at this point. Right. And you see these with the new answer boxes where they can actually give you a recommended clip and they'll say the answer for this question is at the 25-second mark.
I've seen that. Yeah. Like you search a normal search in Google, like how to tie a tie, and you get a video result, but it starts you at the exact second where that answer begins. That's what you're referring to, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that like once they can start doing transcription of videos, then everything that we've seen happen on SEO over the last 5 years is going to happen to video. And so what I mean by that is entity detection. So one of the big things that they made a big deal about at VidCon is that they were actually able to get names right. So they were able to get Darth Vader correct in the example that they have. And so once you do that, well, now I actually can do entity detection inside of a video. So we can now tie that to the knowledge graph. There's also natural language processing where they can understand what's being said. And I think that that's becoming a really interesting space. And that natural language processing is why they're able to identify where the answer is. And so the same thing that they're doing for like answer boxes, they're able to start doing that to the content within videos, which I think is really powerful and will change the way that people can discover that content.
Yeah, this is all super fascinating. A lot I want to unpack there. The context of this is you were tweeting like crazy during the session, I believe. You tweeted a link to something on the Creator Academy, which I'm going to link to in the show notes. YouTube has some really great educational resources, but this part about being discovered actually talks a lot about what you're talking about how to optimize your content, whether it comes to tagging, etc. So I'm going to link to that whole doc in the show notes at evolvingseo.com/wire. But one thing I want to ask you about is they say in that doc, the algorithm follows the audience. What do you think they mean by that?
It's a really good question. So I thought that was a great presentation because it was actually the product people who actually work on, like the product managers, product owners who work on the search algorithm there. They talked about how they didn't have a lot of transparency historically about how it works. And so this was their first kind of major push to make that effort. And effectively, they had a presentation version of what's in that document. And then they kind of added kind of colored language to that and answered a lot of people's questions, which was really great. And then I'll answer kind of the question about following the algorithm, but it was really nice too, because at SEO conferences, engineers are very jaded, right? So you have like nice cuts or mildly historically, who they get asked a lot of questions, they get criticized, and they know that there's an audience full of people trying to find some tidbit of manipulating the algorithm. This team was a lot less jaded. So they were very, very giving in information, which I thought was really helpful. In terms of what I think they mean by chasing the algorithm, or chasing people.
The algorithm follows the audience is the quote again.
Yeah. So I think what they're doing is they're mostly using usage behavior to determine what is important. I think that they're basically saying we're going to apply machine learning and analysis on what audiences do. And I think that they're trying to explain to YouTubers like, oh, well, how do you pick what should be there? And they're like, well, we're not going to pick, viewers are going to pick that. And so what they mean by that in a certain degree is some of this stuff is really simple. So one of the really valuable factors is watch time. How much time is a video actually watched? And they even made the statement that watch time is a ranking factor per keyword. So if I search for a keyword in YouTube, the videos that are ranking there are based off of how much time in aggregate do people watch that video for that particular query. So they're trying to find what is holding people in this on the site, on the video. Another thing that seems to be really valuable is...
Let me pause you there for 1 second.
Sure.
I want to dig into that query level thing because you tweeted about this. I want to make sure the listeners catch that. So if I'm understanding this correctly, I go to YouTube, I search SEO. They're going to choose the video that gets the most watch time after that search is performed to then decide what to rank better the next time. Am I kind of following that correctly?
Correct. That seems to be kind of what they were implying by it. So I think that, I think if you think of watch time as being almost link equity in a traditional SEO sense, that a channel can have a domain authority based off of the cumulative watch and session time for that channel, as well as a lot of other type of engagement metrics like subscribers and comments and things like that. But then there's also probably an authority per video. And I'd imagine that changes. There's like kind of a total amount of watch time that is probably seen. I think that they also give a weight to like recency. So amount of watch time in the first 24 hours. I think that there's like a query deserves freshness type of a thing that's happening there as well.
Yeah.
But then specifically when you're looking at search relevancy, I think that they are effectively saying, okay, we have this aggregate information, which is our first best guess at what's a good video. And then I think they're collecting data on that particular search result and then modifying rankings based off of that. So I think that's very similar to link equity gets you into the search results, but maybe if you have a disproportionate click-through rate in the search results because there's an affinity for your result because you have lower pogoing or bounce backs and things like that, you might move up. And so I think it's very similar to that. They're trying to identify what's the most relevant per query, not just that it's popular and happens to keyword match it.
Right. Very interesting. So yeah, I've heard watch time they look at per channel and then how much your channel just keeps people in YouTube at all, right? So like one tactic I've heard a lot is if you make playlists that include other videos, even from other channels. Have you heard such things before as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So it seems like they kind of talk about session duration, which is they reward people who bring people into YouTube and then keep them on YouTube for a very long period of time, whether or not that's watching your video, some of your other videos, or even if you create, like in your example, a playlist of other people's videos, and you can encourage people to go through there. And I'd actually asked a question. I'd walked up at the end and asked a question on whether or not they value view time of embeds differently than view time on YouTube. And the product guy actually replied back that no, we don't treat them differently, but you're less likely to watch a second video from an embed than you are to watch a second video from on the website. So what he was nodding towards, I think, in that situation is that on average, session duration is higher when people go to YouTube because there are 5 to 10 recommended videos. There's a lot more distractions and things pulling you in. They've done a lot of work to do that. Whereas when there's an embed, there's fewer videos to click on next. Maybe you've disabled that feature. And so I think that that's kind of what they were getting towards with the why there's different value for session duration.
Let's chat a moment about your tweet that says YouTube suggested videos are mostly co-watch and personalized. So first of all, just to get the semantics, the suggested videos, by that you mean on the right-hand side, right? As you're watching a video, these are the recommended videos on the right. So break apart this. What do you mean by or what did they mean by it's co-watch and personalized, and how do they figure out what to suggest to you on the right?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think that you can kind of look at two versions. There's the logged in version, there's the logged out version, right? So it's very similar to personalized search in traditional SEO. If you're logged in, they're going to have some historical information that they can use to personalize. But if we're talking about the logged out version, from my understanding, basically what happens is when you first publish a video, they don't have any data about how that video is related to stuff. So they have to fall back on a contextual, a content-based analysis. So this is where keyword tags are kind of the most valuable, is in this initial period of time. And it sounds like what they do is they will show your video as a recommended video for your own videos based off of your tags. So they'll trust you enough to say, okay, I'll show you as a recommended video where there's overlap of content based off of your tags and the content in the video. As that starts to happen, then they can start to collect data on whether or not people click that video. And then from there, they can start showing that video to other things. So and co-watch is that people who watch this video also watch this video.
Okay.
So one of the strategies that they actually recommended themselves is to understand that there might be a trending topic. So let's say that the Stranger Things trailer number 2 came out recently and people did like breakdowns of those trailers. And that's like a popular topic. So if you publish a video right during that period of time, then you're more likely to be co-watched alongside those people. And it might help you show up in the related search. It also sounds like you can do things to kind of manipulate your own recommended videos. So if you constantly use cards or in cards to drive views from one of your videos to other videos, you can make those co-watch videos, at least within your own videos. But it sounds like they also have done a lot of work in the last year to speed that up. It sounded like that the algorithm to do that analysis was a lot like how we used to think about Panda, that they would have to collect a lot of data and then they would have to like take a snapshot and run this long analysis, and it could take days before they could actually show recommended videos. So I think that they've tried to improve that by saying that like there's different levels of significance that they have where they're getting more comfortable with how correct those recommendations are. And then I think they're doing like a feedback loop on top of that where what's getting the best click-through rate, right? So so I understand that people are kind of co-watching both of these. So I show you the recommended set, but I noticed that more often than not, people are clicking your video. So I'm going to continue to bring that up. But then I think that's being reinforced by what you could probably call like the long click, which is some word phrasing that I've heard in like the SEO world, which is that not only did they click through, but they stayed. So what's the total duration of time that a person stays after that click? And so some combination of that. I don't know if that answers it, but that's kind of my understanding of how that algorithm seems to work.
There's two other interesting things I've noticed when it comes to recommended videos. I don't know if you've seen this. One, I'll start watching a video. Maybe it's like Gary Vaynerchuk speaking at a conference. He'll mention the name of somebody, like this entity thing you're talking about, and I'll look on the right, and there's like a recommended video of that person he mentioned giving a speech or something. So, and I don't see this name in the description of the comments, so I feel like they're using that entity transcription stuff maybe a little bit already, or maybe they're using something else that kind of correlates to that. And number two, this is a little bit more in the past. I've seen videos that just visually look the same in the thumbnail, whether that's an automatic thumbnail or one you upload, also show up as recommended. So like I would do a piano video, of me playing piano, and there would be like one ray of light, like in a certain direction in the back. And then I'll see a recommended video with the same coloring, the same positioning of that sort of layer of light or whatnot. And it'll be recommended. It'll be totally off topic, but I used to see that a little bit more in the past. I don't know if you've seen things like that, but all that's very super interesting. One last thing I wanted to ask you about when it comes to YouTube and SEO is the tweet about where you mentioned keyword tags carrying less weight if they spanned broad topics versus being tightly aligned. Can you break apart that tweet for us?
Yeah, I thought that was one of the most interesting things that I'd heard someone at a kind of a search presentation say in a while. And people were asking about what's the value of keyword tags. And they basically just gave kind of two qualifiers for it, that there is a lot of value for like typos and misspellings and things like that. It sounds like they use it for kind of initial understanding of the content of the video, but that it can provide additional visibility on typos, which feels like very old school SEO.
Yeah.
But then they also made a thing that if you use them, the more closely related the topics are that you put in there, the more weight that they tend to give to those tags. So what they're trying to avoid people doing is just saying, I'm just going to throw out this massive net
like
and just try to get coverage on keywords that aren't relevant.
Yeah. Like totally random stuff. Like, so in other words, like when I post my SEMrush tutorial videos on YouTube, like make them all very, very closely related to SEMrush, keyword research, content marketing, or is that even getting too broad? Maybe like how niche is your sense of this? Like, are we thinking like they're all very long tail under one topic, or can they kind of jump out a little bit?
I think it's a good question. I think the way I would think about it is, are these keywords that you think your video would get high watch time for if it ranked for that keyword? So where you're saying that it's about content marketing, but you're saying that the keyword you want to rank for is content marketing. An SEMrush video might actually do really well if you had like a generalized video about how to use SEMrush for content marketing. If it's really solid, then I think that could rank. But I think that if it's just a foundational how-to for a certain feature, then it might be too broad. My guess on how they're doing that is probably like lexicon co-citation, which what I mean by that is when they crawl the internet, how often do they find words appearing on the same page together and kind of have a relationship between words? So I'm assuming they're using some of that information to make that determination. But I thought it was really interesting because I think in SEO and YouTube SEO, we often talk about like the weight of a factor. And I've always kind of heard the idea that different factors can get more weight whether or not there's data missing. So if you don't have a lot of link data, then on page might carry more weight. And now it actually looks like they're also talking about the fact that they do a meta-analysis on a factor and determine whether or not that factor should carry weight at all. So I think that could actually carry over into the world of SEO. They're probably doing very similar things, or like how much weight should an H1 tag get, or how much weight should a title tag get? That might not always be the same if they have determined that factor is itself not trustworthy, which makes a lot of sense because they do that kind of stuff with links already, where they're turning links on and off based off of whether or not they think that link has factors within itself that mean it shouldn't count.
Fascinating stuff. Now, I want to get to some slides you had from back in March on video production for online marketing. I'm going to link to the slides in the show notes.
Oh, awesome.
I want to chat about this a little bit because we've talked a lot in theory about YouTube videos and SEO, but I want to give the listeners some tangible tips and advice that you have in your slides here about video production and using video in their marketing. First, let's set the context of this. When we're talking about using video production for marketing in the digital space, are we talking about all types of videos? Could this be organic YouTube content, Facebook videos, in a website, for advertising, for social media? Are we kind of like casting that wide of a net to begin with?
So I think there is that wide of a net that can be cast. I would say that Briggsby, in my personal experience, doesn't reach into all areas. So I think that you can do everything from video on landing pages, trailers for video games. You can do product reviews. And there can be just like educational videos. There can be kind of sell videos on like B2B landing pages. So I think there's a wide variety of stuff. Most of the stuff that we've worked on has been in kind of two kind of categories. One is, I would say, social media videos. Videos oriented towards Instagram and Facebook. And these are much more visual in nature, typically have a lot less audio other than just kind of music or background. Most of the things that are being communicated is communicated in terms of text on the screen. And doesn't necessarily make them any simpler. Those are actually really, really hard to get like interesting ideas across. So we've worked on videos such as kind of the cooking videos that you might see on Facebook. We've done those for some larger brands where we actually take something, we cook it. But then on the other side, it is more of the traditional vlog, where maybe we're actually helping describe something. So this is like a talking head, where it's really kind of straightforward, and we're trying to answer questions, trying to deal with very specific type of educational content. And then that type of production is actually a lot simpler because it's usually just like a backdrop, a nice little studio setup, and straightforward. And then like the cooking stuff is usually a little bit more complicated because you have to clean dishes between shots.
Sounds like fun though, depending upon what you're cooking. I'd probably enjoy that. So in these slides, you mentioned a few ways to find opportunities via keyword research for video content. One of them having to do with SEMrush. I loved this tip. I do similar things with plugging in like Quora.com into SEMrush to see what's ranking for Quora in Google. What's the tip here for finding video opportunities in SEMrush?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that one of the things that's hard is that video SEO has kind of changed in the sense that it's kind of hard to see video results in the same way, because most pages with videos now don't get like a full rich snippet, and only a handful of sites do, and one of those is YouTube. And so really what the tip here is to go to SEMrush and do a search for them. And if you're not familiar with SEMrush, it's basically a large database of keywords on which they track domains. And so they say, okay, here are all the keywords within our tens of millions of keywords that we track that we have found this domain ranking for. So I pulled a report that says, show me all the keywords that youtube.com is ranking for, and then actually search for the keywords that are relevant to a client within that subset. So in the example that I'd given, I'd search for French press. And so basically what I'm asking in SEMrush is give me all the keywords that you have that include French press, but YouTube ranks in the top 24. And this really kind of shows me a couple of things. One, it kind of shows me what kind of are video keywords. So there's not a lot of really great opportunities anymore to do like video keyword research. But the other thing too is I still think that video SEO is a thing in the sense that video results are still a vertical. I think that they determine that a particular result deserves a video result in the same way that sometimes you get local packs because it has localized intent. I think sometimes content or searches can have a video intent. And they try to identify pages that have videos on them and return those. And so I'll often see this in the sense that usually if I find a YouTube video ranking for something, the page that YouTube video is embedded on also seems to rank for it, right, even though it doesn't have the rich snippet. So I think that they're identifying like this one has video and they're pulling it up. So what I mean by that is this identifies keywords where the intent for video is higher. So where you have a disproportionate chance to rank with video content versus non-video keywords. So I think that people are looking for videos for things like how-to and educational queries. And so this is kind of saying like, hey, Google knows that people sometimes want videos for this. And so if you have a video for this, you have a greater chance to rank than just being the person who's text. So the way I think about it is if I'm looking at the top 10 and this is a video keyword and 9 out of my 10 competitors are all doing text, then I'm just another person who's trying the exact same approach with the same article.
Right.
And I think that you see this in a lot of verticals where just all the competitors have written their version of what this answer is.
You want to know something? Sorry to interject. Something I've been doing lately, having my clients make PDF versions of the content and adding that as a link onto the piece of content, because quite often you see people search keyword PDF because they're looking for, you see this with recipes, they're looking for a printable version, or like a moving checklist was another client that had an example. It's a similar thing, right? Where you're adding another type of content into the page as a value add. And now I do believe what you're saying there, that Google's looking at, okay, everyone's got text, but you've got a video as well, helping to explain the content in a different way. It's also why I believe in adding audio to your content too, if you can, podcasts. So I love that tip. Now, in terms of the way, like, let's dig a tiny bit deeper into the talking head type videos. So like the how-to, the instructional, are you thinking about making this content to get it visible in Google search? Or are you also doing this content for clients to get them visibility within YouTube? Or is this content to have something to promote on Facebook? Talk to me a little bit about how you're getting the awareness and the eyeballs on this content.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the answer is kind of yes to all of them. So let's talk about like a potential talking head. So let's use an example such as how to paint a room. I think that you can identify something like how to paint a room, and you could go through an instructional video of how to do that. Now, I think before I would write the script for that, I would do a lot of keyword research to create a very SEO-informed script. So what I mean by that is within that, there is how to mix paint, how to open a paint can. And I think that you could sit down and in one production and pop out probably 30 to 40 different videos where you've only recorded one time, but you've cut it multiple ways. And so now you actually have a lot of different content. From there, I would probably then be focusing on making sure you get them transcribed so that you have textual content. And it's really a way of kind of starting from the video and bringing it back to text. I think one thing that I see a lot of YouTubers missing out on is that they focus entirely on the platform itself and don't think about how they can actually use other channels. So start thinking of YouTube as your website, and organic search is a channel that you can bring it in. So one channel that drives me nuts is SciShow. I really, really enjoy it. They do a lot of how-to content on like science-based topics. But if you look at their website, it's just completely unindexable. There's like no title tags. They don't have URLs or anything like that. And I was like, I can't find your content because the only time I can find it is if Google ranks the YouTube result. So I think there's an opportunity for channels like SciShow to say, okay, not only am I trying to get visibility inside of YouTube itself, which is huge, but also when a person is searching for, I can't think of a random query, but like, what is the history of film, right? So they do some videos on like film history. So why are they not ranking in the top 5 for that? They should. They have a great video on that kind of content. And it's simply because they don't have a landing page. And so going back to that fundamental small client that we're talking about, sometimes people just don't get traffic because they don't try for it. And I think that that is one of the major differentiators. So we're looking for how can we use video content to get visibility in both of those platforms, both YouTube search as well as Google search. Although I think that you have to realize that YouTube is its own beast. And a lot of the ways that people create content generically doesn't necessarily work. I think you really have to have that personality, that more vlogger feel. Yeah. And I think that seems to resonate a lot better on YouTube. Yeah.
And by the way, I know I made the invite a little longer than the hour. Do you still have time? Am I cutting you short or something else here?
We're good.
We're good. Okay. I've been making most of my shows over an hour long, which seems to be I get good feedback on that. So I'm going to roll with it. You, the listener, likes it apparently. So we're going to keep doing it. Give us a couple quick tips on looking good on camera. I know you had some of this in your slides here, but we're talking about talking heads. How can you, as the person with the talking head or facilitating this video being created, make sure that the person looks good on camera?
That's a really, really good question. There's a lot of things you can do. So I would say the first thing would probably start with lighting. Most bad videos I see don't have good lighting. The easiest way to get good lighting is stand in the sunshine. Try not to be backlit. You'll find that women typically look better in like what you would call soft light. So that's like diffused. Think about light coming through a cloud or bounce it off a wall. Men typically look a little bit better in harsh light, which think of harsh light as being a light on one side that falls off and there's more shadows. So just investing in some decent light. And if you don't have a good light, then I would say go outside, stand in front of a window, or bounce a light off of a white wall in front of you, and then have that just kind of cover your whole face. From there, I would say that like clothing choice is something that's really important. I mentioned in the presentation like jewel tones. So there's certain types of colors that make the skin look really good. And avoid things with like patterns. So especially because most people who are going to be doing video will be using a DSLR camera. And there's a problem with some patterns where it'll look like it's kind of shimmering or kind of electricity going through it. Mm-hmm. And the only way to kind of fix that in post is really kind of like blur it to a certain degree. And so once you've recorded that, unless you're pretty good at editing, you're going to have a headache. So just make sure that you're kind of testing that type of stuff. A few of the other things I talked in there too was I think a lot of people don't invest enough in makeup. And so I think just making sure that you have makeup, I think for the most part, it's just to make a person feel comfortable because you're going to sweat under the lights and you want to make sure that your pores look good and all that kind of stuff. And so, and the only last tip I'd say there is like UV or a sunscreen kind of makeup with like kind of UV protection in it can actually show up under bright lights. And so you want to be careful and kind of make sure you test all that kind of stuff. And I would say that the biggest problem that I have is glasses. Those are an absolute pain. So the only tips that I have for that is I talked about you can kind of angle the back of your glasses up that cause your glasses to point down. Yeah. So think of your glasses as being a mirror, right? And it's just like the angle that it comes in is going to bounce out in the opposite angle, kind of like physics 101. And so you're trying to like tilt your glasses down so it's pointing the light down towards the floor as opposed to into your camera's lens. Yeah. So those are some of the types of tips I can at least say in terms of how to try to make yourself look better.
And one quick and easy tip that you have, and that I know as well, putting the camera slightly above eye level. I've tried to film myself sometimes and the camera's below my eye level and I look ridiculous. So you're mentioning a lot of like fancy things, cameras, lights, makeup, etc. I'm wondering about the how realistic and practical it is for companies or agencies to be creating video for their clients. Do you need this big, massive budget? Do you need big, fancy cameras? Or, give us a little bit of inspiration, encouragement if we're somebody that doesn't have a huge budget for video.
No, I think that it's easy to kind of make it more complicated than it needs to be. I mean, it's an overused kind of phrase that the best camera to use is the camera that you have. I also think that YouTube is relatively forgiving on production value, and they'll kind of forgive your ability to kind of improve. And I think it's probably true for like podcasting as well. Like you probably are a lot more effective at podcast quality now than maybe your first episode or two. Mm-hmm. And you'll find that audiences will kind of work your way up there. And I think that I watch Gary Vaynerchuk as well, and he's one of those people that like overthinking something is just going to prevent you from doing it. So I'd say an iPhone today is actually pretty good. And then below that, maybe something like a T5i or T3i. I think the biggest thing that you'll realize is that the differences between camera quality disappear when the lighting becomes really good. Mm-hmm. So typically the reason that a camera costs so much is something called dynamic range, which is like, I can see in a really dramatic range of color or light situations. If you're standing in front of a window and you're well lit and that camera is really close to you, you're going to have a really hard time telling the difference between a $500 camera and a $1,500 camera. So I would say that like, don't necessarily let your equipment stop you. And you don't necessarily have to do that stuff. But I think you're absolutely right. Put the camera higher up. I think that makes people feel a lot more confident because you don't get that like under chin look. It will make your chin a lot more defined. And then the only other thing that I can recommend is don't stand against a white wall. I think that looks really bad. And then the only other thing would be separate yourself from whatever's behind you. Mm-hmm. And if you do have the opportunity to shoot with the DSLR, put the background out of focus. So it's called depth of field, but effectively put yourself in focus and the background behind you out of focus. If you're doing it with your iPhone, have someone tap your face and hold the finger down until it locks focus. And then focus will be locked like right where you're standing, and then stand there, and then your background will be less in focus. So I think those are the types of tricks to kind of make your production value look a little bit better. If someone's not into video, I might have just said a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense. But.
Well, I'm going to put links to all this stuff in the show notes. I know what you're talking about because I have experience with cameras. If somebody were to have a little budget to get a decent DSLR camera and a decent mic, what are two that you would recommend that are good kind of like beginner to medium level without getting like super ridiculously expensive?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of people start off with like a T3i or T5i.
Is that a Sony?
These are a couple $100s. These are Canon. DSLR cameras. You can usually pick those up at like just a department store like Target or something like that, or on Amazon. The nice thing about these is these are your first kind of interchangeable lens camera. And I think that really allows you to kind of have a little bit more flexibility. I think that's one good camera. If you want like a point and shoot, my favorite point and shoot right now is the Sony like 1X or RX 100, I think it is. Yep. It's a little tiny point and shoot. And then from there, if you do have the money to invest, I think 70 and 80D on the Canon side are really, really common vlogger cameras. So I think they hit like the $1,000 range or so. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I've upgraded. I have a Canon C100, which is more like a video camera. And then I have a Canon 1DX Mark II. But that's where you get into like relatively large cameras that you don't need that much. So I think this like a T3i is like a good place to start. Short of that, your Android or your iPhone.
And one thing people neglect a lot is audio. And so you recommend having an external mic, and you mentioned one of the slides. What is that mic again that's external you can kind of attach to your DSLR camera?
Yeah, so I pointed out a couple of things. So you'll notice that people can put up with bad video. People do not put up with bad audio. You'll notice this anytime you've ever tried to watch something with bad audio. So the problem is the microphone on your camera actually has bad preamps, and that basically means that it does a really bad job of amplifying your voice without adding noise. And so buying an external microphone allows you to do two things. One, you actually get a device that's dedicated to capturing sound, so the quality is going to be better. But the second thing is that you can separate your camera from your audio. And I'm not going to get into like fall off or everything like that, but basically the rule is be as close to your microphone as you can be.
Yep.
So that means that you can put your microphone right off screen somehow, whether or not you put it on a tabletop below you or you mount it on a boom pole up above you, but your camera can be far away. And that's one of the really nice things about it. So the two that I'm talking about here is there's a Rode shotgun mic. I think it's called the Video Mic Pro. You can put this on a boom pole. You can put this on a stand. You can put this on top of your camera if you're vlogging. The other one was the Zoom H4. That's a little bit older now. There's a lot of different models of them. I also have the H1, which is really small. And this is, you can talk into it itself. It has built-in microphones, but it also can allow XLR inputs, and which are like those big cables with like the 3 prongs, if you don't know what those are. And that just allows you to connect to more professional microphones as well. So, but I would say to start, I would probably do something like the Rode. Right now I'm talking on like a Yeti mic. So you can also get those online, and they'll record kind of through USB on your computer.
Yeah. And by the way, we're flying through what could be like episodes and episodes or courses and courses. So I'm going to try to link to some resources in the show notes for people that want to dig further. But this is just to get you started, right? If you want to get into video content. In post-production now, you mentioned one thing which I disagree with a little bit. You talk about avoiding silence. And I imagine maybe you're referring to a talking head or maybe like a recipe thing. I often find, and maybe this depends on the type of content, but I like a little bit of silence. I like some silence even when somebody's live on stage. It allows me as the content consumer a chance to kind of think and reflect and process what has been said. And I've seen some content, video content online, where they chop out every last second of silence, and it almost is a little hard to pay attention to. So am I taking your recommendation a little bit too far? Like, do you agree that it's good to have a little bit of silence in there to allow some time to process things?
It's a good question. I think that again, the same way that we were kind of talking about consulting before, everything about creating content is about thinking about the audience. So I would say that if I'm doing a conference, if I'm doing something that is a little bit more complex or really needs some kind of contemplation, I do think having some space in there is valuable. I think that if you're teaching a person a complex topic, that you can plow through things a little too fast. So I think that it depends. Now, the reason I had recommended cutting out noise is it's very, very common if you're just talking about YouTube itself, that a lot of videos and vloggers there do not leave their spaces or leave kind of spaces between them talking. They basically say, I'll finish a sentence, I cut at the beginning of my next sentence, and I just push those together. And there's like these fast jump cuts and keeps it moving. That becomes really common on YouTube. So I would say that your audience that you want to grow is on YouTube, then I would understand like that's what the audience is used to. Yeah. And they consume content differently. I've noticed at least like videos within the SEO space, we've gotten very used to people just sitting and talking for 8 minutes at length. And I think that you could take some of those 8-minute videos and cut them down to 4 minutes and still be able to process most of the information. And really what you're trying to do is you're trying to prevent drop off and fall off. So like as you're thinking about watch time, the question is do you see your audience getting frustrated with fast cuts, or do you see people dropping off because they're getting bored? So I would look at your analytics and then try to make a decision based off of that. If you do see that people aren't making it through more than 4 minutes of an 8-minute video, then it might be worth testing a faster cut video to see if you can get a longer retention on that video. So I think it kind of depends. Whenever you do something for like Facebook or Instagram, you got to get that stuff out there very fast. And so I think there are some situations where like you don't have time. You're just trying to plow through something very, very quickly. And in those cases, I would cut a little bit faster. And I think that's part also personal taste. Like I get bored when I feel long, slow cuts. And so I think I'm a relatively faster cutter.
Very interesting. And I think Philip DeFranco is a good example of one of these talking head people, a YouTuber. He's not like B2B content, but he's a great example of somebody that does those quick YouTube-like edits that you're referring to if you want to check out that sort of style. Real quick, editing software, do you have a preference or a recommendation of how to get started with that?
Yeah, so I use Adobe Premiere. I mean, I obviously have just the Adobe Cloud, so I really, really like that program. I think Final Cut, my overall opinion of it is that there are certain things in it that are much easier. And so if I were just getting started, I would probably use something more Mac related, like Final Cut. But once I started getting more sophisticated, I felt more comfortable accomplishing those things in Adobe. And I think part of that is because I at least have some experience with Photoshop. And so it just kind of felt like a smoother, more practical transition between Photoshop, After Effects, and Premiere. I really like kind of being within that system. But I know some people really, really like Final Cut. I find certain things much easier to do. So if I want there's been times when I've gone back to Final Cut because I was like, I just want to hammer this out really fast.
Right.
And I can do some things in there a little bit faster than I think that I can in Adobe. But that's at least my preference. I mean, unfortunately, there are some costs associated with that. So I think that's kind of the hard part. Some people have some issues getting into editing because it's like, well, the good stuff costs money. I know there are some free ones. I don't have any good recommendations off the top of my head, but I know there are some lower cost options out there.
I mean, every video to this date on my YouTube channel is made with iMovie, and I don't do a ton of editing, but iMovie might be a good place to begin if you have a Mac because you have it on there already. It's free, and it's going to get you a little used to Final Cut, right? Because it's basically a free version of Final Cut. It's very boiled down. So I want to chat just for a moment about vlogging and vlog-like content. I know you tweeted a little while ago you were thinking about making some content like this. Mm-hmm. Is this something you're still interested in? And for a little teaser for you and for all the listeners out there, I haven't really talked about this a ton, but over the last month, I've been practicing and gearing up to making maybe not a vlog, but certainly vlog-inspired SEO-based content. I've got my new to me DSLR camera right here. And so I'm very excited. And this conversation between you and I happens at a very fortuitous time. So I'm curious, are you still thinking about creating some of that type of content as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so since I probably had that tweet, I just had life circumstances. So I had to make a last minute family trip, which is why we had to reschedule. And then I just got married a week ago.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, thank you. And I know it's one of those things where like it's easy to make excuses for not doing something, but no, we're definitely in a place where that's the thing. I think where I've actually kind of struggled is whether or not I want to write content or create content about SEO, or whether or not I want to create more content about other things that I'm interested in, whether or not that's video or film, which is one area, or whether or not I want to talk more about business, consulting, entrepreneurship, and things like that. And I know that you can kind of do all of those within one channel. But I think that in order to kind of grow a strong audience, I don't want to have too many topics that I'm covering, because I don't want people who came in about something like entrepreneurship or consulting, who maybe is like a graphic designer, to then get frustrated because I'm talking about JavaScript indexation the next week. Yeah. And so I'm really kind of thinking about where I want to allocate my time. And so mostly I'm just trying to get past being married and all of that kind of time that took. And so now that I'm kind of past that, probably in the next couple of weeks or so, I'm going to probably be in the same page as you. I've done a little bit of practicing. We've kind of got a full setup, and I've kind of gone through and kind of got my whole little setups. You can actually see in the video as we're talking right now. People who are listening can't see, but I have a boom pole with a shotgun mic on it behind me. And that's actually kind of part of our setup. And we're hoping to actually do some vlogging starting soon.
That's awesome. I see it. I've got my camera right off your screen here. I just hit record. I'm just trying to document things during the day. And what I was very similar to you, I'm not as concerned topically what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to focus a lot on SEO, a little on podcasting, on content creation and consulting. It's going to be a mix, kind of like what you're dealing with. But I was largely trying to figure out, well, what's the set going to look like? What's the look and feel going to look like? You know, what's my style essentially? So I've been practicing just hitting record on starting with a laptop. And now for the last week, this DSLR for like the last month, and just like literally hitting record and talking or documenting what's happening as I'm going through my day. So it's been a ton of fun, and I can't wait to see what you come up with awesome. With your video content. So let's wrap things up in just a moment. I want to circle way back to something you just hinted at, and that is working with your spouse. So you said you just got married. Congrats on that. But also,
thank you.
Stephanie is a part of Briggsby, right? So what does she do there? And then I've got a couple questions about how that goes.
Yeah. So Steph is practically 50-50 here at Briggsby. She's effectively my business partner, my life partner, everything like that, best friend. So she has a background in market research. She actually went to Boston University. And she kind of got into SEO by actually going to one of the Search Love conferences that was there. And she worked at Sear. She actually oversaw digital outreach at Sear. And that's actually when I met her. I met her actually at MozCon of all places. And so she's through and through an SEO, and we have very different kind of skill sets that we bring to SEO. She has more of a traditional marketing background with education and experience in digital PR. And then I come to it very much from a traditional technical, just internet geek kind of a background. And so we have kind of a division of labor in terms of skill sets. Even though I would say after working 3 years together, I would say she could hold her own with almost any technical SEO in the industry. And so we've kind of split up work based off of that. And then her and I have kind of slightly different tasks in terms of like the business operations. So she oversees most of the operational parts of the business. And then more the kind of like text-based communication in terms of client communication. And then I'm typically more of the showman. Which means that when we go to clients, I'm the person who's having to stand up and do all the talking. And that's kind of how we work together. And it's been really great. We've been working together for 3 years now. And it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I mentioned you my email. My wife is a part of my company. Now, she doesn't have a marketing background. She has a degree in business. So she helps with all the behind the scenes stuff. So I'm very much entirely the person doing the SEO and out there in public. But she's doing all the billing, all the accounting, a lot of business stuff. We have a business meeting once a week. So I'm familiar with perhaps the challenges and the joys of working with your spouse. I was curious, I wanted to ask you, how do you sort of separate your work and your non-work life? Like if you're going to go on vacation, or I assume maybe you went on a honeymoon, or maybe you will, like, do you find yourself taking the work with you, like talking about it? Does it come up? Do you try to separate those two things, and how does that work for you?
That's a great question. I think that it's definitely been a learning process. So, I mean, I'm sure you're familiar. Working with your significant other has its pros and cons. For us, we've decided that the pros way outweigh the cons. But in terms of the first thing that we did is we have an office. So where I'm at right now is an office completely separate from where we would live. We find that being in the house, working together and having a home office, there's just no physical separation. So the physical separation of actually getting up in the morning, going all the way to an office, even though it's just the two of us, and then just driving back to another place is a really great way to create that separation. And so that's one of the things that we do, I think, to kind of make that separation. We typically discuss sometimes work stuff in our personal life, but I think it's okay because we're both very passionate about the thing that we do. But then the other thing I think, too, is we've kind of realized that sometimes work stuff's going to come up in a way that it's just the price you have to pay. So I think the hardest thing about being a two-person company, and it's one of the reasons we've considered hiring, is that when we leave, the business closes and the doors are closed. And so we have to accept that while we have the flexibility to take off any time we want, there might still be some things that come up. So we had a client actually during our wedding who actually had a de-indexation problem, and they left us alone for like the 4 major days of our wedding. But the day before we left, and the exact day that I got back, I was just like hitting the grindstone as much as I could, and there was really not a lot of downtime, just in terms of trying to find that problem. So I think that those one of those things that were like, well, that kind of sucks that you have that as part of your lifestyle. But then the other part is you can travel and work remotely. If there's a day that you have to deal with an errand or deal with some family stuff, it doesn't mean that you have to close your office to take care of it. And so we kind of find that that's really, really helpful. I don't know how you guys feel. I mean, I think that for us, it hasn't really been too much of an issue. I think that sometimes it can get a little stressful, and there's been times where we've been like, hey, let's just not talk about work anymore. And I think that we've had some pretty good boundaries on kind of defining when we don't want to talk about it.
It's funny.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'll just throw in. So it's funny. You both go to your office to work. So I'm here in my office, but my wife stays home at her home office. She likes to be with the pets and kind of like enjoy. We have sort of a nice backyard, and she kind of enjoys watching the birds and the nature, etc. And we sort of find that we work best physically separate as well, although we do have a few meetings. So. But like I said, she's doing a lot of the business stuff, and I'm doing mostly all the SEO. So the work that we do together doesn't have to interject, although she's been really helping a lot behind the scenes with some newer types of SEO services that I've been providing, which I could tell you about offline if you're interested, Justin. But
yeah, that'd be awesome.
But yeah, I mean, I think you sort of hit the nail on the head. Like, the physical separation is actually a huge part of how we're able to have success, I think, with what we do. Even though we don't necessarily have to have an office, it is nice to have a place to come that's like, now I'm at work, and then you go home, now I'm at home, and to kind of have that separation. So, well, congrats again to you and Stephanie for the marriage and for 3 years with Briggsby. I think that's awesome stuff. We're going to wrap things up in just a moment. But Justin, as I wake up my iPad here and start to turn on the music, tell listeners where they can find all about you and Briggsby online.
Yeah, so I guess our website is briggsby.com, briggsby.com. I'm on Twitter at Justin R. Briggs. Those are probably the two areas that kind of most prolific. I definitely need to be blogging more, and soon there will probably be a YouTube channel to add to that list. Okay,
I was going to ask, is there an address for a YouTube channel yet? Do you think it'd be Briggsby or?
It probably won't be Briggsby. There is a Briggsby SEO YouTube channel where I posted one video like a year ago, but I don't have a channel name to share just yet.
Awesome. Well, definitely go check out Justin online. Justin, thank you so much for joining me on Experts in the Wire, and we'll see everyone. We'll talk to everyone next time. Take care.
Thank you.